Hello, everybody. I hope everybody's doing good today. Remember that next week, let's get to your, oh, I hope I'm still signing. Next week is your test. Okay, so it's going to be week 3. You'll have your exam. Okay, it'll be posted on, it's going to be on chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it'll be posted Monday morning, and you will have until Sunday midnight to take it. All right. So don't forget that's coming up. All right. And I'm slowly but surely getting your chapter review sheets posted there. Okay. And I'll have those done shortly. Everybody will have one done by at least Sunday. So you know you're doing good or whatever. And I'm trying to get both of them done. All right. At least 2 this week. All right. So this week we're going to be this time chapter 4 we're talking about ecology and communities, and there's a problem out there, and the case study is a really neat one. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen um, these fishies here, all right, the flying carp that they talk about, but this stuff, these guys are crazy. All right, there's information out there on these carp, and they just
This is what
hypothesize
happens when a particular population of
is they
fish
just
in the
start jumping
Illinois
in
River is
circles and
startled.
Yeah, oh, right around back,
by the
behind the
regulators and
boat.
park ranger
Wow.
autos and stuff like that.
Watch out. They're everywhere.
We brought these over from Asia because we wanted to eat our stuff. All right. But if these get out into the Great Lakes, like they talk about in that case study we will review here in a second, watch out. All right. So let's get to the chapter here and talk about the Great Lakes and what's going on with that. All right. So in this chapter, we are going to uh, talk about species interaction, the feeding relationships, energy flow, and stuff like that. We'll talk about keystone species, secession, disturbance, community change, potential impacts of invasive species. Okay, and we'll talk about restoration and ecology, and then we'll talk about the biomes real quickly. All right. So, central case study: the leaping fish backward river Asian carp threaten the Great Lakes. And I'm telling you, if this stuff gets into the Great Lakes, we're going to be in trouble. So, 1960s, 1970s, we brought in catfish farms, where catfish farms had a waste water treatment plants, and they began importing carp to help clean up the algae that was growing in the algae and snails. Okay, because that's what they eat, and it was perfect. So they try to make a living machine here and get everything nice and even. But what they didn't realize that some of these individuals escaped into the streams and rivers and ponds and the lakes. Okay, and then they started breeding, and the Asian carp has been very successful out there. All right, they didn't belong here, and now they're taking over the ecosystem. All right, and the Mississippi River, all the way down. All right, and right here is the Great Lakes, and this is big economics. We have a lot of shipping that goes on, and they're talking about they right now they have electric barriers are now in place. So when the fish fly up here, they get shocked. All right, and the further they get, the more they get killed. All right. And it goes both ways. So the fish in the lakes can't get down in here either. All right. And they're thinking about actually cutting some of this off and just, nothing is going through there. And what are we going to do about the shipping lanes? We'll have to take the stuff off the ships and then go that way. Okay. Very dangerous stuff. So the Great Lakes already has become a host to about 180 non-native species, and the zebra mussels is a perfect example because those ships floating back and forth brought in the invasive species of the zebra mussel, and it might have gotten there naturally. All right, okay, who knows? Okay, but the ships just helped it because all over the place. And the zebra mussels introduced through the ballast of the water, the ships. They just stuck to those ships. So, what further impacts could the Asian carp have on the Great Lakes? Who knows? All right. But answering this question requires the knowledge of how each of the populations in the Great Lakes interact with each other. All right. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but when we look at the ecosystem, we know what they like to eat and what will be the results and stuff like that. Okay, we set up these models and we predict by watching nature. Okay, because we know in Mother Nature we have certain species interactions. You have competition, predation, and mutualism. Competition, we're both competing for the same thing. And predation, the same kind of as is the same, I think, as parasitism and herbivore, because you're preying on another living species. You're not eating something that's dead. All right. Um, so predation, the predator and prey, everybody knows about that. Parasites inside of our body, like COVID, and herbivores are the caterpillars, and all these are living are going after a living species. Mutualism is where they both get along. All right, they both have positive impacts. Okay. You ever see those little birds on top of the water buffalo? Okay, they pick off the ticks and they get protection for the water buffalo. Species like the zebra mussel interact with their ecology community in many different ways. Okay, organisms that seek the same resources have relationships called competition, like we just talked about. There's intraspecific. Oh, I hope I don't run out. Let me plug this in. Species like zebra mussels interact with the ecology in many different ways. All right. There's interspecific competition, which takes place between two members of the same species. Okay, me and you going after that Snickers bar would be interspecific competition. Okay, interspecific competition takes place between members of different species. So me and my dog going after that Snickers bar is intraspecific competition. Okay. And competition becomes more intense as the populations and become more and more dense, right? The more people we have in one more of any population in one little area, the more competition is going to be. That's just common sense. Over many generations, natural selection, all right, may favor resource partitioning, all right. And you remember, natural selection is just the process of someone having a mutation and developing a new gene so that can take advantage of something else in the environment. So this bird had a mutation and charged his bill changed, so he's able to get out the insects out of the bark. Okay, and that becomes resource partitioning because this woodpecker developed a stronger beak. It gets the insects deeper inside the uh, tree. So they're both using this. Okay, they're both doing this. Okay, and this could be mutualism because the bird is keeping the tree nice and clean, right? So it's getting a good advantage, and the bird gets something to eat, right? In competition interactions, each participate negatively affects the others by taking the other's resources. So one's going to be hurt, and one's going to uh, be be increased. Predation is the process by which individuals of one species, the predator, capture, kill, or consume an individual of the prey. So you got to remember, predation. You have to have something that's alive. Okay, and caterpillars, herbivores, all right, are also predators. Okay. The Asian carp were introduced to prey on the algae and snails. All right. But we didn't know what was going to happen, or we kind of probably did. But they got out into the environment, and now we got the flying carp all over the place. Predators that are better at capturing prey will live longer and reproduce more, of course, right? The survival of the fittest. Prey have the risk of the death of the selective pressures, causing the evolution of many different types of defenses. Right, so we got your good old camouflage. You got the Bayesian, where you look like something else. All right, someone gets mimicry. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, mimicry, where you look like something else. This is a caterpillar. It looks like a snake. Warning of coloration. So the brighter the colors, you typically the more dangerous or poisonous the insect is. Okay, that's why the free guy ever watched Survival Guy. I don't know if he's on anymore. I don't get Discovery anymore. Um, but uh, he says he goes out in the woods and lives for 2 weeks by himself. He says, "Don't eat the bright insects because they're the poisonous ones. You got to go on the rocks and get the black ones, the ones that are hiding. They're the ones that aren't poisonous." Okay, and very interesting. Okay, there's also parasitism, and this is kind of like a prey as well. Okay, because it's a relationship where one organism depends on the other for nutrients. All right, the coronavirus depends on us to be alive. Okay, and it's unusual because it doesn't result in the organism's death sometimes. Okay, sometimes you can have a symbiotic relationship between these organisms, and if I die, like the COVID inside me is going to die. Okay, it just wants to make me sick. Okay, parasites live in the host in many different ways. Okay, inside the host, such as the tapeworm, and you got the lampreys on the outside of the sharks and stuff like that. Free living such as cockatoos, who lay their eggs in the nest of other species. All right, so they go out there and just have some other species raise their chicks for them. So parasites that cause disease are called pathogens, and the pathogen can be like anything like malaria or tuberculosis, hepatitis. Any of those are pathogens or parasites within inside of us. And the host adapts to counter adapt. The host counter adapts. The inside of us, we let it go with these antibodies to go and attack the parasite to go kill it. And our body's designed to have a lot of things in our DNA are predetermined. We've seen these parasites throughout our worlds, and that DNA with someone was born with the gene that helped defend that, right? And lo and behold, that we always have that inside of us. The duel of escalating adaptation between parasites and the host is known as evolution arms race. So this is where germ theory came um, into theory. Okay, because we'll always have, and there'll be another COVID out there. All right, and we always need to understand what's going on. And yeah, I'm just amazed at how fast we did get this vaccine, and we owe that to 100 years of science, 120 years of science. All right, of the collective body of how vaccines work and how viruses work and all this other stuff. I mean, we would not have this fast without all that old stuff. All right, amazing. All right, and I'm grateful that we have a lot of companies out there that wanted to help us out. All right, because they wanted to profit, and they're not profiting that much. All right, but that's what they want to do. They want to save the world. Right, the scientists that work for them do. All right, and yeah, they're allowed to make a buck. Okay, uh, but this one was a little bit too much. Okay, there's other things they can make a buck on, and they can make a buck with single payer too. They can make a lot of money with single payer. Okay, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just glad. But talk about the scientific method and the collective body of knowledge of what science is. That we just did that with the COVID. That is proven, and we know what we're doing. It's a great, great process. Okay, and yes, sometimes we make mistakes, but well, it's good. So remember, herbivores too are predators. They exploit plants. Okay, and they feed on the tissues of different plants. Okay, just like the little insects. Okay, and there's also what's called mutualism, where the plants help each other out. So the hummingbird helps out the flower by taking out the nectar and transferring that pollen into the next plant. Okay. Ecological communities. So we learned last chapter that a community is the symbol of populations of living organisms in the same area. So any defined area, whether that's a campus, how many um, groundhogs, blades of grass, sophomores, juniors, deer, and antelope are there on Robert Morris campus. That is the defined area, and that would be the community, all the living things on Robert Morris campus. So most of the important interactions among the community members involve who eats who. All right. So we're going to go out, and the species is a community of given the rank within the feeding hierarchy. All right, it's called the tropic levels. All right, so the lower on the tropic level, we'll explain tropic levels in a second. First, you have the producers. All right, the primary producers. Primary producers are all the plants that use photosynthesis or chemosynthesis down there in the bottom of the oceans. That's called chemosynthesis, okay, to make their own sugar. So if it wasn't for the primary producers, all the plants in the world having this magical ability to take sunlight and convert it into these different chemicals such as sugars and glucose and oils for us to consume, all right, they would if we wouldn't be here. All right. So they take that sunlight, transform that energy into other stuff and store it stuff that we use and then we eat. We are the primary consumers. All right. So we're the primary consumers of the producers. Okay. Of the primary producers. Secondary consumers prey on the primary consumers. So secondary consumers prey on the primary consumers. And the tertiary consumers prey on the secondary consumers. So these would be like the meat eaters. Okay. And then the detrivores are the decomposer parts, right? These are the ones that after they die off, we have our decomposers. So this is not, they're eating non living organisms. Okay. At each tropic level, most of the energy input is either used for maintenance or lost to heat. So at each tropic level, you have about 10% of the energy content of the organisms or biomass compared to the level below it. All right, so a predator is going to use a lot more energy than this plant. Okay, and every time you go up the chain, you lose about 10% of that energy. All right. That's why beef is so expensive because it takes a lot to keep that beef right here in this 10. That's bigger than the chipmunk, right? Takes a lot to keep that beef alive. Okay, than it does the grass that it eats. Biomass is the collective mass of living matter in any given place and time. So biomass is all the community. All right, here on Robert Morris campus. So all the groundhogs, trees, grass, freshmen, juniors, all that is the biomass. Okay, the pyramid pattern, the energy of biomass illustrates how eating at the lower tropic levels decreases your ecological footprint. Remember, you had that assignment, you had the ecological footprint, and you were asked what you can do in it. Whoever said that they could eat less meat was definitely right, right, because it's a lot less energy for these plants here, okay, than it is for that cow. We'll learn a little bit more of that in the agricultural system, okay. The flow and energy of feeding relationships from lower to higher tropic levels is depicted in what's called the food chain. All right, we've all seen the food web and the food chain and how complex it is. We got our detrivores down here, all our bio decomposers. All right, so we got the worm that eats up all the leftover organic matter, and its poop puts it into the soil. All the breaks down the nutrients to its final molecules, where the plants can take it up, and also the fungus do this too. All the mushrooms and fungus in the soil. Soil is totally alive, so the plants can uptake those nutrients again. All right, and then the deer comes along and eats the nutrients over here, and then we come along and you shoot this deer and have a nice venison chili. All right, so it's all one big old food web, and an ecologist would study all this food web and how all this stuff turns around. And in environmental science, we look to see how man affects this food web. All right. The species that has impact the greater than its abundance is called a keystone species. So a species that has an impact far greater than the amount of animals out there is called a keystone species. Okay, these can be anywhere on the tropic level. All right, they can be the decomposers. Okay, um, the red worms are keystone species. All right, because they replenish the soil. They're the only ones that do that kind of thing. All right, ecological system engineers, so beavers and prairie dogs. Okay, the beavers put up all these little dams and they create the rivers, nooks and crannies where things can build up, and the fish then all of a sudden have a deeper pool to hang out in, and a tree falls over and gives them a little protection. I mean, it's just so neat. How a beaver can change a whole river. All right. And then there's also the top predators, all right, who control the populations at the lower tropical level. So they are keystone species too. One of the greatest, I want a great video to watch someday. Go to YouTube and put in the wolves of Yellowstone, all right, because the wolves of Yellowstone. I think we go over this uh, case study. I think it's what we're doing through this chapter, but it's in the book. Um, the wolves of Yellowstone, we took out the wolves, all right, and Yellowstone started collapsing, all right. Well, it didn't collapse, it just changed a lot, all right. There was definitely a noticeable change in Yellowstone. We were brought back the wolves, and Yellowstone started coming back, all right. And it was a great because we took out the keystone species. All right. Another one is the sea otter. So the sea otter, and remember, it could be on any part of the tropic level. All right. And the sea otter and the algae and the sea urchins all get together. All right. These all three are basically our keystone species. Okay. The sea otter controls the sea urchins. The sea urchins control the um, big old kelp fields. All right, and all things live happy and ever after. All right, but one day we took out the sea otter. We would club him on the head and wear him on as a hat. Okay, and there was no more sea urchins to be able to no more nothing else to eat the sea urchins. Okay, because the sea otter's keystone was to eat these things. All right, and they killed off all the kelp. All right. But the sea urchins also, if they weren't around, this kelp would have got totally out of control, and the sea urchins and the otter wouldn't be able to live here. But this also takes away, gives Nemo protection and things like that. All right. Makes the kelp fields, makes everything going. All right. So once we took out the sea otter, we saw what's called a trophic cascade. The whole kelp fields collapsed and the fishery collapsed. All right. Slowly but surely, we reintroduced this stuff and are building them back. Okay. So we know we saw from our mistakes. And we almost saw that also in Yellowstone National Park. Okay. There's also what's called a disturbance, and a disturbance is anything that happens real rapidly, and this is usually caused by a capricious act of nature, a hurricane, or a flood, or something like that. And it could be a large scale, or it can be small and localized, like a tornado, right? Or it could be as big as a hurricane. Okay, so a community that resists change and remains stable shows resistance to this disturbance. All right, and that's why I like biodiversity so much. All right, because biodiversity allows community to withstand these things and have some resistance. All right. And this is called resilience. All right. So community has changed by a disturbance, but returns to its original state has resilience. And biodiversity equals resilience, which equals sustainability, in my humble opinion. So severe disturbances may eliminate all or most of the species in a community. All right, but as long as one really survives, we can have the secession start again. All right, and secession begins with the colonization of the pioneer species. All right, such as your grasses and your little mold, or your fungus and stuff like that. There's always a if you guys want to make some good money and you like to go camping, okay, there's you can go over the summertime and you go chase down the forest fires, okay, and when the forest fire goes out, one of the first things that pop up are going to be these mushrooms, and they're going to be the pioneer species, and they break down all this stuff, all right, but those mushrooms are big bucks in the restaurant, so you go out and harvest them, and you can make some good money, all right. And then after the mushrooms come back, there go the grasses, all right, and then all of a sudden, yeah, the trees and things like that will start. All right, this can happen due to capricious acts of nature, or it can, farming can happen. All right, but sooner or later, if we let everything go, it will return to its natural state. So, introduction of species or non-native arrivals to the community are brought by people. Most fail to establish populations, but the ones that thrive are called invasive species. So not everything can establish a population here. All right, the boa constrictor probably couldn't live here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, all right, out in the wild because it's just too darn cold. Okay, however, it's nice and comfortable down there in Florida, and they even now have a show on History Channel chasing boa constrictors down for big money. All right, because nothing's going to eat them here in Florida. They have no competitors, and they're getting away with stuff, and they're hurting the ecosystem. They're hurting the ecosystem of the Everglades. All right, it's a scary thing. Okay, introduced species become invasive when limiting factors that normally regulate their population group are absent. All right, so most of the time it's competition, predators, and parasites. All right, there's not around in Florida. The boa constrictor doesn't have any competition for what it's eating. All right, the predators are non-existent, and I guess it could probably get sick if its population gets big enough. But some of the parasites that were down there, they have to be brought in with the original um, boa constrictor to be passed on. Okay, and this can also happen, in the marine world, and then the marine world is even harder because we can't drain the ocean and take out these carp. All right, but the Asian carp became invasive, outcompeting native fish for the zooplankton and stirring up the sediment as they consumed the native plants and mussels. So they did a lot. I mean, they forage on the bottom here too, so it's tough. Okay, eradication of the invasive species is extremely difficult. All right, so we try to aim to control the population. So since the 1970s, we've put a lot of federal funding in has been provided for control measures. So we're netting juvenile fish or contracted fishermen to catch the adults. All right, you can go up to Palmatuming and join a little hunt all your carp you can, or you can fish with. I mean, it's just crazy. You go out there with the boa constrictor, you can actually go walk on some of the carp in Palmatuming Lake. All right. Sometimes they'll bubble in carbon dioxide to kill the water, and so the fish die off. All right. And they'll do large noise or even electrify the water. All right. You should see what they do. Just YouTube it. It's pretty funny. So control and eradication have become very expensive, though. So now attention is given to preventing future invasions. Okay, that's what we got to do. Prevent any more from coming in. That is very important. Okay. So scientists who study restoration ecology devise ways to restore, alter, and areas of their condition before industrial civilization. So restoration ecology is trying to restore it the way it was. Okay, restore and functionality of ecosystem and return the community to its pre-settlement condition. So, in Wisconsin, they're doing this. Okay, out in near Chicago, Illinois. They're taking some of their farmlands and replanting all the wildflowers. We have one out here in Raccoon State Park. We have a wild flower reserve. Okay, that's not really restored, but we're trying to protect that little area. Okay. In Florida, dams and canals and levees are being undone to restore the natural waterways because I've learned that the Everglades, we turn a lot of these things right here, and we can just nice and easy for our boats to get down. Okay, and also to drain some of the swamps so we can have some farmland over here. Um, we've learned that that was not the way to go. So Florida is now restoring a lot of these things. Okay. Now, quickly, we're going to go over the Earth's biomes and then finish this up. Okay, so you got to important. It's important to remember a regional complex of similar communities is called a biome. All right, and biomes are classified primarily by the dominant plant type and vegetation structure that's in there. Okay, whether it has a lot of trees, it's a forest, right? If it has cactuses, probably a desert. Okay, and what really grows there is a a result of the climate of that area. So the cactus that grows in the desert is going to grow in the desert because of the climate. The trees are going to grow because of the climate, and that climate is basically the precipitation and the temperature out there. So the world contains a number of terrestrial biomes, and each covering a large geographical area. So you have the tundra forest up here, the Arctic, okay, right here. You have the boreal forest, okay, in these little areas, okay, the desert areas, okay. So temperature and precipitation exert the greatest influence of which a biome is found in any given area. So temperature and precipitation is the most important thing. Okay. And you can see here with down here we have the rainforest, a lot of good temperature happening here, a lot of rainfall, a lot of biodiversity. Okay. And later out in the desert, less rainfall, extreme temperatures, okay, less biodiversity. And this also goes as we go up the a mountaintop as well. Okay, so it's not only just the longitudes and latitudes that we see here. It's also as we go up into the mountains. Okay, and we have a whole bunch of different biomes out there. We have the deciduous forest, which we live here in Pennsylvania, which is just a bunch of trees. Okay, that's why we call it Penn's Woods. All right, temperate grasslands, which would be like the grasslands out there in the plains. Okay, we have the temperate rainforests out there by in Washington and Oregon, out there in the Pacific Coast, where ET hung out. We have tropical rainforest out there in Brazil. Okay, one of the most popular ones, because this has the most biodiversity. It's probably one of the biggest. This is one of the biggest terrestrial land carbon sinks. So without this, that carbon cycle, all right, a lot of the carbon that we release gets put back into the rainforest, which is a good thing. Okay, so we don't change the temperature. Okay, we keep that carbon balanced. Okay, but recently the studies, you guys can do a current event on this. The recently studies have shown that the rainforest is not sucking in as much carbon as it used to, and now we're adding. Okay, we definitely are adding to the atmosphere because since I started this class, we went from 280 to 420 parts per million. So we're definitely adding. Uh, but this is important to save the rainforest. Okay. You also got the dry forest like you have out there in California. Okay. The savannas, plains of Africa. Okay. The deserts, the tundras. Okay. And the boreal forest. And these three are probably the only ones we really haven't tried. The deserts we haven't done too much. All right, not much we can do, but we are trying to restore them back to some fertile land. Okay, um, so China is trying this. They're doing a good job of trying to restore that. Tundras. We haven't really messed up with these, but we are changing the makeup of this because usually the tundra is frozen all the time. Okay, and since global warming is happening, this is going to start thawing out. When this thaws out, all the anaerobic bacteria down here that decomposes stuff is going to come back alive and going to start decomposing things and set out some more methane. It could start a positive feedback loop or even warm up the earth greater. All right. So environmental studies, humanity's effect on the environment. Well, our temperature is affecting this one right here. Is changing how this tundra really is. Uh, you know, oh, it's crazy. All right, boreal forest too. We don't really, we don't like to live up in there, but we are actually doing this. If you guys ever heard of the tar sands, we'll talk a little bit more about the tar sands in the energy section. But this is where the boreal forest is. A lot of the tar sands are in here, and it's tar sands are an oil that's in a sandy, in oil within the sandy loam soil. And we're cutting down these trees and taking out the soil and getting that oil out and driving our cars on it. It's crazy. Chaparrals are like out there in Las Vegas with all the temper with the um, tumbleweeds. All right, so those are the basic biomes of the world. Just it's important to note that the biomes, if you know the temperature and the precipitation of an area, you can figure out what is going to grow there. All right, and that's why we bring in all these other things because we say, hey, okay, we saw my grandfather was part of the Army Corps of Engineers that helped build the I-7. I think it's called I-70 that goes down, or I-79 or something that goes all the way down to Florida. Okay, I can't remember what the name of that interstate is. But they decided to use this thing called kudzu, and they said, okay, this grows really nice out there in China. We got the same biome, or in Japan, got the same biome, same temperature and precipitation. It has these beautiful little purple flowers. We won't have to cut it. It's not like grass, and it'll grow real nice. Lo and behold, it'll look really good, and then all of a sudden, you start taking over. All right, and this vine just went all over the place and started choking out the trees. And now we're spending more money trying to cut it back and keep it back than we would have spent if we just put down native grass and cut it with a lawnmower. All right, craziness. All right, so that's it for chapter 4. Okay, don't forget you have a test coming up on Monday. And if you have any questions about that, please send me an email. Thanks. Bye bye.